Hello and welcome, dear friends, as we continue this 21st year of the Turner Winter Series. I'm Maureen Raveno, and I am delighted to offer this very heartfelt welcome on behalf of Greg Peterson, the founder and perennial host of the Turner Winter Series these many years. We welcome those of you who are with us this evening in the comfort of the Kappa Theater here in the Robert H. Jackson Center, as well as those who are enjoying this program virtually. Thank you for being with us. It is my great pleasure to begin our evening with a brief introduction of our guest, Pierre Chagnon, after which I will turn the conversation over to Jamestown and the Jackson Center's own Greg Peterson. Pierre Chagnon is known throughout Chautauqua County as one of its most outstanding citizens, having served in almost every significant sector. Professionally, he has worked in executive positions in business for planning, analysis, purchasing, distribution, management, customer support, operations, and human services. His community service has embraced such varied contexts as leadership for area development for the South and Center Chautauqua Lake sewer districts, on the Arts Council of Chautauqua County, the Reg Lene Civic Center and its Development Corporation, the Audubon Nature Center, the Roger Torrey Peterson Institute, the Central School Board of Education and Youth-Focused Mentoring, the Rotary Club, and the Lawson Center. His legislative commitments have also been remarkable, including in our Chautauqua County Legislature and on its numerous committees, as well as serving as president of Ellery and also as one of its town councilmen. Most of all, however, his dedication to the preservation of our lake and to the overall health of our regional environment is legendary. As you can see, Pierre's service to the life of our county and to our community is truly exemplary, as we are about to hear. And so, I am now very pleased to present Pierre Chagnon with Greg Peterson in heartwarming conversation.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Day to Maureen O'Connor Raveno. In case you didn't notice, she was here in pure green Technicolor. And you must know, Pierre, that Maureen sent a note out to all of her friends at Chautauqua Institution because she has been Chautauqua Institution for many, many years. It's called the Grapevine. And she introduced tonight this way. Because she is, as you know, having in her prior life met with presidents, chief justices, bishops, and those of high stature, high cotton people. Yet she has a great deal of discernment, and she described you this way. If Chautauqua County were to give an outstanding Citizen Award, Pierre Chagnon would be a most likely candidate, well known for his contributions in every category, including most notably as a primary protector of our sacred lake.
Wow.
Does that sound like you? And, well, we're so thrilled you could join us. But, you know, you had to come from someplace. So talk a little bit about your background. Talk about your mom and dad, first of all.
Well, I was born in Jamestown, grew up on the shores of Chautauqua Lake in the Driftwood area. That's between Jamestown and Bemis Point. The youngest of 7 children. And the lake was my nursemaid for a good part of my life, but my mother in childbirth had severe health issues, so I came home from the Jamestown General Hospital with a nanny who my father had brought from the convent, and the nanny stayed with me for 5 years. When I went to kindergarten at the age of 5, I came home and my nanny had left. She couldn't bear the thought of me leaving the house. So that was my upbringing. From there on,
Talk a little bit about your dad, too.
My father was an attorney. He came to this area after my mother's first husband was killed in an industrial accident in Jamestown. So he came at the behest of the Army and the Air Force to bring the business back to life. My mother's first husband and her had started a tire retreading business in Jamestown. And with the war effort to conserve rubber, people were no longer allowed to purchase new tires. So the retreading business exploded. And at the time of the industrial accident, they were retreading all the tires for the entire state of New York, all the state vehicles. It was a horrible explosion and fire. My mother was blown through a plate glass window. Her husband was out of the building, went back in 3 separate times to bring workers out to safety, and he was burned over 90% of his body, and days later he died. So my father was brought in to restart the company, restart the business, and the rest was history. They were married, and my mother and her first husband had bought the house on the lake, so that's where they moved to, and that's where I grew up.
This is Matthews Tire, right?
This Matthews Tire and Tread. Ken Matthews was my mother's first husband.
Then, education-wise, you found yourself to go to Maple Grove. Was it Maple Grove at the time?
It was Maple Grove. I started at the Maple Grove High School halfway through my 8th grade. Prior to that, we were at the old Bemis Point High School on split sessions because there was too many students for the building. So I would go to school in the afternoon. My brother would get off the bus, and I would get on the bus at noontime and just go to the afternoon session.
So from there, Maple Grove, and then, did you know, was there any question you'd be going to a higher education, or was there a draw to go to the business, get into the business?
My draw was actually to go to veterinary school. So that's why I went to Cornell, because Cornell has the only veterinary college in the state of New York. And I chose not to do the animal science route, which most of the students did. I loved biology, so I really wanted to be a biology major. And so I was in with all the pre-med students, very competitive. But my fall of my senior year, I got called to the admissions office of veterinary college, which was early, and I thought that was great. And the admissions director said, Pierre, I've looked, your resume is terrific. Your education, your courses you've taken, your work experience has been terrific, but we can't take you into college because word has come down from Albany that in the last 10 years, we've had 13 students from Chautauqua County go through this college. We're not taking any this year. So,
Interesting plan, affirmative action.
yes. So I cast about a little bit. University of Pennsylvania could, if they really wanted to, take somebody from New York. I got connected with the University of Guelph in Ontario, and went there, had a very interesting interview. The admissions director was gushing. He said, Pierre, I'll offer you a position right now. A couple of strings attached. You will move to Ontario. You'll work in a field unrelated to veterinary medicine for 3 years. You'll revoke your US citizenship, and then we'll take you in to the veterinary program. I said, thank you, but no thank you.
Did they confuse you with Pierre Trudeau?
Yeah. So I came home and I said, now what am I going to do with my life? So I started taking some exams. I took the law boards, I took the medical boards, I took the optometry boards, I took the graduate record exam, and I took the podiatry boards. And so I got my 5 board scores, ranked them in order, top of the list, the business boards. I scored I could go into any business school in the country I wanted to. So I applied to the #1 business school at the time, Harvard, #2 business school at the time, Stanford, and the #3 business school at the time, Cornell. Got accepted at Harvard. After working for 6 years, I would be accepted into the business school. Stanford, I would be accepted after working for 7 years into the business school. Cornell said, come on down.
Wow.
So I decided I was going to go to business school.
So you went to business school, so you jumped from anatomy and physiology into finance.
Yes.
It seems like a logical flow.
I had many people that said to me, did you waste your 4 years getting your undergraduate degree? And my answer was always the same. I studied for 4 years what I loved, which was biology.
Right.
It wasn't a waste of time.
Well, and obviously a skill set which has found its form today. And then kind of continuing your arc, you come back and work for Matthews Tire.
Yes.
How many years were you there?
I was there about 4.5 years. I came back because my mother's health had deteriorated substantially. My parents had been divorced previously, so my mother was running the business with one of my brothers, and I had received a job offer with Exxon in international finance in the Netherlands, and she said, sorry, you have to come home. So I came back home, and 6 months later, she passed away. So I was left running the business.
Being the president of that, Matthews Tire, and how long did you run the business?
About 3 years.
3 years? Was it on Fluvanna Avenue?
No, in Faulkner,
Faulkner? Okay, that's right.
Faulkner Street.
And then after that, the draw, there was Marlin Rockwell for us old timers, which subsequently became TRW Bearings Division, and then MRC Bearings, a unit of SKF, and SKF Aero Engine. So was that a natural flow from Matthews to that?
Well, Greg, it's interesting because at the time that I was running the business, retreading was a dying industry, and it was dying because of the radial tire. And so the business was in a downward spiral. And so I decided that I really, after working in that business for the number of years, I decided that I wanted to go someplace and work for somebody else because I didn't like my boss. And so at that time, I decided to close the business. And it was about that time that I met a young lady who would eventually become my wife. And so she kept asking me, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I said, well, you might know some people that help me. I can get a job. I mean, I'd like to stay around this area, especially now that I have an interest in staying in the area. And so she was living in a complex where one of the executives from MRC or from TRW was. And so she introduced me to him, and he said, we've got to get you an interview. So he got me an interview, and immediately went to a job offer. So that's how I made the transition from self-employment, running my own business, to going to work for TRW Bearings Division at that time.
Now, you've introduced the fact that you met somebody who would be your wife. What was her name?
Her name was Judy Zam.
And how did you meet?
Well,
This is for the benefit of the kids right now. Your children will be watching this.
another good story. When I was running the
I've got
business,
time, I just want you to know.
when I was running the business in Faulkner, I'd go to lunch at a little diner in Faulkner, and a couple of other gentlemen, we would have lunch together. One of the gentlemen was the owner of Zam and Matson Farm Supply Business, And so we got to be friends. And one day his wife showed up for lunch. She was very interested. We had a nice conversation. And then a few days later, his wife and his daughter showed up. And that was my future wife.
Do you think she was scouting?
She was definitely scouting.
What would you think she was looking for somebody, because obviously she's a class act and she's a winner. So what do you think her mother was looking for?
Well,
What did you bring to the table?
I think she was looking for someone who had a good family background, had a level head on his shoulders, and would be a provider for his daughter in the future. And her daughter's side of the story is that she couldn't believe that someone that her parents liked, that she would have any interest in that person.
Well, we're not taking any questions from the gallery. We'll have to leave it at that. Well, I'm just, again, looking at the resume, and I won't go through it all, but TR Bearings Division, business analyst, supervisor of business analysis, financial marketing manager, manager of product planning, purchasing manager, and then it became MRC Bearings. You're a manager of materials, director of materials, customer segment team leader, GE and Rolls-Royce, customer support team leader, all aerospace. Then it became SKF Aero Engine North America, project manager, Venture Aero Bearings with GE, director of human resources and EHS, and as I got to know you more, the director of operations at SKF. So you were basically the top dog down here, certainly locally. And what people may not remember, but I do, that it was not a guaranteed thing that SKF would be in Faulkner, which it is now, but it would remain in Faulkner. There were some tense moments, and to the extent you can share some of that, but you were in the middle of all that, and I give you much credit for the fact that it's still there.
Well, Greg, I think the story really begins with, at the time I was working for the president of the company, and he came to me and said, Pierre, we're going to close our plant in Philadelphia. And I want to move that remaining work someplace in Greenfield, USA. And I said, well, why don't we move it to Faulkner? And he said, why would we ever move anything to Faulkner? I said, because the product lines are very similar, the skill sets are very similar, the equipment is very similar. I think we could move that to Faulkner. So he said, if you think so, look into it. So we looked into it, gained some local support for the idea, and lo and behold, the idea was bought, and we built a small addition onto the Faulkner plant. We moved the equipment up here, and I had the unenviable task of closing the Philadelphia plant, laying off the people, closing the facility, and selling it. So that was the first step. Then, a few years later, after closing another plant, the president came to me and said, Pierre, we have to close the Jamestown plant. We have to get out of that facility, which had been downsized, and basically had our heat treat operation in it. The heat treat operation is the most critical operation in the bearing manufacturing process. And he said, so I want you to find a place to move that down south, and then eventually we'll move the whole Faulkner operation down there. I said, why? Why don't we build a new heat treat facility here? And he said, who would ever build something new in New York State? Come on. He said, the southern states are giving all sorts of incentives to move businesses down there. And I said, I don't think that they would give you a better alternative than building it in Faulkner. He said, then go find out. Go to these 3 states and check them out, see what they have to offer, and see what you can come up with from New York. So I did. I went and visited 3 states, met with their industrial development people. They made some very attractive offers. So then I knew what the stakes were. And so then I came back and met with the IDA, Bill Daley at the time, and Rich Dixon, and met with our Senator Kathy Young and our Assemblyman Bill Parment to gain support. And we eventually put together a package of incentives that convinced SKF that the right thing to do was to build the plant in Faulkner and keep the operation here. So we built the new heat treat facility, built an office building in the process, and the rest is history. It's still there.
Well, it's a history of which the county, and certainly specifically Faulkner, of which I've been involved for years, and the IDA tip a hat to you. And I'm not sure most people know the story of how you were so instrumental. I was at many meetings which you were an advocate extraordinaire for keeping SKF here and making sure that the offers were consistent and would be sustained and approved. So I applaud you. I want to just publicly applaud you.
Thank you.
Because I don't know that anybody had a ticker tape parade after this was all happening. But
Well,
it's still there.
while you're giving tip of the hat, we should give a tip of the hat to Mayor Abe Madison, Mayor of Faulkner, because in the first move to bring the Philadelphia work here, he was very, very instrumental in that, with your assistance.
Well, all of that, but I'm not, so I applaud you, but that's kind of, we've just kind of done an overview of your really personal life, your professional life was extraordinary, and then you got 3 pages of you in your community activity, and which is incredible. But where did that itch come from? Where did the Pierre Chagnon, because you're spending a lot of time at SKF making sure deals are made, doing a lot of time making sure businesses are created, and all of that. Where did the itch come from?
Well, my father was a very firm believer in community service, and he instilled in us very firmly the concept that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so that's really where the drive came from, is the desire, the drive, the commitment to give back to the community.
And where did it first manifest itself? I mean, I see a lot of youth activity, a lot of soccer activity. Was that your initial kind of foray into not-for-profit volunteering?
That's a very interesting question. I really can't point to what the first step was. Certainly, through our children getting involved in youth activities and youth sports was a big step. But I believe that I was on the Ellery Town Board before that journey really began.
Well, who approached you, Pierre Chagnon, business entrepreneur and executive, I should say, business executive extraordinaire, to get involved in politics? Was there somebody, and I know there's some players in Ellery, to come up and say, Pierre, I'd love to have you on board?
Yes, there were a couple. Let's see. Names are not my forte anymore, but there was a councilman who they had a vacancy, and he really thought that he came, visited me, sat at my kitchen table, and gave me the sales pitch, and I said, okay, we'll give it a shot.
The Craig Millers of the world.
Craig Miller, thank you.
Yeah, it was seemingly the Ellery councilman, and the Ellery supervisor forever was
Arden.
Yeah.
Arden really was very, very supportive. My whole time on the Ellery Town Board, very supportive of my desire to build the Ellery Town Park. So he was certainly very instrumental in support of me. And when Vince Horrigan came to me and said, I'm giving up my seat on the county legislature to run for county executive, and I want you to come to Mayville and play with me. The next phone call came from Arden Johnson saying, you really need to do this.
He let you go. He released you.
Well, I had been released before that, and he wanted to get me back into the saddle.
Got it. Yeah. Arden Johnson, by the way, right?
Yes.
So now you find yourself in the legislature, but at the same time, it's kind of every organization of significance around here, the Reginald Civic Center, the Civic Center Development Corporation, and Rotary and stuff like this. You got the legislative part, you got the not-for-profit part. How did you keep it straight? And oh, by the way, occasionally working.
It's an acquired skill. I don't spend a lot of time doing frivolous things. And like I tell people, and like my wife likes to tell people, I like to be busy. I'm at my worst when I'm bored. So it's something that I crave, to have the stimulation of being busy.
Well, that's why you got a 6 Sigma green belt at SKF, by the way.
Yes.
Not everybody gets it. That's for those that we won't explain it in great detail, but that's an honor. That's an honor. So now you're on the county legislature, and what we know you for as being the ultimate steward of Chautauqua Lake. And was that just a natural that you would gravitate your interest as a legislator towards what the county and others can do for that lake?
It was not a natural gravitation. Really, the draw started, like I said, growing up on the lake was my nursemaid. I was in the lake, on the lake, all the time, 12 months out of the year. So that was a draw. But the real involvement began thanks to my wife getting my job at TRW Bearings Division. My first month on the job, I'm sitting in my cubicle trying to figure out what to do, and the president of the company walks into my cubicle and introduces himself and welcomes me aboard and says to me, your father was one of the founders of the Chautauqua Lake Association, wasn't he? I said, yes. And he said, well, I live in Lakewood, and we had a sewer project just started, and it was shut down by emergency order because of enormous cost overruns. And myself and several other residents really want to get that started up again, and we want you to help. I said, what do you say to the president of the company your first month on the job? You say, yes, sir. What do I do? So he got me involved in the Citizens Advisory Committee that we met and we strategized and we talked to engineering firms, and we ultimately settled on Malcolm Perney to put together a proposal to resurrect the sewer project, which we were successful with a lot of help from Attorney Greg Yaw in putting a proposal together that we were successful in restoring the federal and state funding. The federal funding was 75% of the cost, and the state funding was 12.5% of the cost. And so we were successful in getting that all restored with the revised plan that Malcolm Perney had put together. So then we reestablished a sewer board for the 2 sewer districts, the South District and the Center District, one board for both districts. And I was appointed to the sewer board. And a year later, I found myself as chairman of the board when we began building that project. At the time, that was the largest public works project in the history of Chautauqua County, and it was run entirely by a volunteer board of directors.
Wow.
So that was a long process of a lot of work. I was working 40 hours a week for TRW Bearings Division, and I was putting in at least 40 hours on the sewer project and trying to take care of a young family at the same time. So why was I drawn to that? Love of the lake.
And the president encouraged
And the
you.
president.
Having had similar stories, I know what you're talking about. So you are now the chairman of the South and Center Sewer District. And so that's really and that ran from where to where? Well, ultimately, when that, I don't want to say phase one, but where did it go from?
Well, the project was to upgrade the sewage treatment system for the village of Lakewood, the village of Celeron, and West Ellicott. So the project was to decommission their sewage treatment plants, build a new sewage treatment plant in Celeron, and extend the sewers on the west side of the lake up through Lakewood into the town of Bustye, and crossing over to the east side of the lake, running that up through Bemis Point to Maple Springs. So that was the project that we built at the time. So through that process of building that project, we brought the project in below the original cost estimates and on schedule, and we actually extended the service area beyond what the original project called for. So it was a hugely successful project.
On a timeline, when was that first, I'll use the first phase concluded? When was that?
When was it first concluded? Now, that's a date that I don't hold dates really well.
Okay, well, then I forget I asked the question.
Okay.
But then we have phase two, there was this, acceptance here, and with the ultimate goal of trying to do the lake, that's a dream, because you just went through the half of the lake. Now talk us through how the rest of this kind of.
Well, as you say, completing the public sewers around Chautauqua Lake was a dream, but the funding that we enjoyed with the first project, 87.5% funded by federal and state money, the funding dried up. There was no funding available for building new sewer projects. So we went a long period of time before we even thought about trying to pursue building the rest of the sewers around the lake. And it was Vince Horrigan's dream. Vince Horrigan, when he served on the legislature, he also served on the South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District Board, and his dream was to complete the sewers around the lake. So before he became county executive, when he and I were running for election, he came to me and said, "Pierre, after we're elected, I want you to run the project to complete the sewers around the lake." And I said, "But Vince, there's no money." And he said, "That's your problem." So Vince had the dream and had the support, and Vince, with his personality, was magical at bringing people together, bringing support together. So he got the local stakeholders together, and we agreed the first thing we needed to do was to have a plan put together, a comprehensive sewage management plan for Chautauqua Lake. And so we agreed to put it out an RFP for a consulting engineer to put that plan together. And our daughter was a civil engineer working in Syracuse on sewer and water projects. And when I mentioned this to her, she went to her boss and said, "We have to get this project because this is my lake." And so she convinced her company, O'Brien and Gear, to put in a proposal, and it was an excellent proposal, of course, because our daughter put it together. And
Who has a name? Your daughter's name?
Janelle.
Janelle, okay.
So they got the project to put together the comprehensive sewage management plan. which was the groundwork for this. And that was completed in 1982. And of course, there's still no funding available. So she and I went to work trying to find out how to get funding. And from my past work with Senator Kathy Young, she was one of the ones that I called on the strongest. And she kept telling me, Pierre, there's no funding. Pierre, there's no funding. Pierre, there's no funding. And so after giving her lots of information about the needs for public sewers on Chautauqua Lake, she said, I think DEC is the organization that we really need to work on, the New York State DEC. So she said, I'm going to call a meeting in Albany. And she was the chair of the Finance Committee of the Senate. And so she said, you come and you bring your engineering team and we'll see what we can do. So we went and we had a meeting, and the head of finance for DEC sat right next to Senator Young, and I was sitting at the other end of the table where she choreographed it. And we explained, we gave all sorts of information. And after we made our pitch, the woman from DEC said, but Senator, we don't have any money. Senator Young said to the group, excuse me, I need to adjourn this meeting for a few minutes. She said to the woman from finance from DEC, in my office. They left the room for about 10 minutes. They came back in. The woman from DEC said, we'll see what we can do. So the door was cracked. And in the meantime, we had, the county had hired a lobbyist in Washington. So our first trip to Washington, he had set us up with some very fascinating meetings. One of the meetings was to be with the head of finance for the Environmental Facilities Corporation. I'm sorry, he had previously been the head of finance for the Environmental Facilities Corporation of New York State. He was the head of finance for the EPA in Washington. So he came in the meeting, and so, what can I do for you? Said, Chautauqua Lake, we're trying to put together a project to complete the public sewers around Chautauqua Lake. He goes, Chautauqua Lake, upstate New York, western New York, right? I said, yeah. He says, we financed a sewer project around Chautauqua Lake when I was head of EFC Finance years ago. I said, oh yeah. I said, I was the chairman of the sewer board when we built that project. Really? He says, oh, do you remember so-and-so? Do you remember so-and-so? Then we're like old pals from prep school. Wow. And at the end of the meeting, he says to me, you need to talk to EFC and you need to talk to DEC. And he says, here's your script. Here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. So we came back and we followed his script. And lo and behold, we got a grant for the first phase of the project.
Which in essence was the second part, the extension.
Extension.
Yeah.
The extension, the project that we prioritized was the west side. Let's complete the west side. Okay. Because the unsewered portion of the west side of the lake was between Asheville-Bosse's and Prendergast Creek at the fish hatchery. So we looked at that project. We had our daughter's engineering firm do a project evaluation of that, and they recommended breaking that into two phases. Phase one would be from Asheville-Bosse's to Stowe. Phase two would be from Stowe to Prendergast Creek. So we got the funding for phase one. And if I can check my dates here, we got the funding for that in 2018, and it was completed in 2023. And before it was completed, we received the funding for phase two. We received the funding for phase two in 2022, That phase was completed in 2025, last year. And so then the next phase,
Which, by the way, connects where at Prendergast Point? Is that the Chautauqua?
it doesn't connect. That's where the North Chautauqua Lake Sewer District begins,
Okay.
is on the north side of Prendergast Creek.
So it's the South Center Sewer District extension up to Prendergast
Yes,
Creek? Okay.
yes. So then the next phase was to complete the public sewers on the east side of the lake. And the east side of the lake was sewered up through Midway State Park. And then the town of Chautauqua, or the North Chautauqua Lake Sewer District came down to Galloway Road. And then the town of Chautauqua had a small sewer district at the condominiums. So the town of Chautauqua eventually completed the public sewers between the condominiums and Galloway Road. That was my daughter's project as well. And so our phase 3 was to complete the public sewers from Midway State Park through Point Chautauqua. And so that funding was just received in December of last year. So we have just kicked off that project. We are now advertising for design engineers. We have the funding required to build that last final phase of the public sewers around Chautauqua Lake.
There was a Post-Journal article which led with this. The lead was, after decades of pushing to get a sewer system created around the entirety of Chautauqua Lake, that dream may soon be a reality. County officials made the announcement Wednesday that the South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District will be advancing in a third and final phase of construction. With this, the lake will be fully surrounded by sewer districts offering public service to residents while better protecting the lake from degradation. Quote, major public work projects like this require determination and sustained support at every level of government, said County Legislative Chairman Pierre Chagnon. Finalizing public sewers around Chautauqua Lake will fulfill the goal established by County Executive Horrigan in 2013. This is a historic achievement that will improve water quality, strengthen property values, and support the long-term vitality of our lake communities. That is an amazing statement, an amazing, when that happens, when finally the final golden stake, I assume you'll have a golden stake at some point, that, I don't think I thought this would ever happen. Did you?
No. When we completed the first sewer project, when no funding was available for years and years and years, I had really thought that the dream had ended until Vince Horrigan said, I have a dream. And he is the reason that we are where we are now.
So I'm visualizing because you give not only Vince, you, and maybe you'll throw in Raleigh Kidder just for the heck of it.
Raleigh has been our unwavering supporter
Absolutely.
through the whole process.
He's been remarkable. There's much of you to say, take pride, but I'm sure that's almost foremost about everything you've done, and you've done a lot. This idea of the sewer being completed. Just think of it, the ring is completed.
Your question is?
Well, the question is, as you sit back and you look at, things that are point of pride.
My pride really comes from my personal experiences, from accomplishing things. I like to be busy, but I like to do things. I don't like to be busy talking about doing things. I like to be busy doing things. So my sense of accomplishment is the addition onto the Faulkner plant, the creation of the heat treat facility and saving the Faulkner plant, building the sewer system originally, now extending the sewer and completing the vision, the dream of public sewers around Chautauqua Lake. of creating a Ellery Town Park, of starting a sewer or a soccer organization, of things like that. Those are the things that give me the most pride, things that we created, that we started, that we accomplished. Doing things, not just talking about them, but actually doing them.
Well, you're the epitome of the follow-up, follow-through, and part of the follow-up and follow-through is not only you're, within shouting distance of getting the sewer, that assists dramatically in the quality of the lake, but that's not the only answer. And I know this Saturday, the county executive, Mr. P.J. Wendell, and you are really calling together a symposium about the lake. And I know that's a keen interest to everybody who's watching this online. And can you give us kind of a Reader's Digest, what you hope to accomplish Saturday at the Chautauqua Lake Symposium, which is at 9 a.m. at the Chautauqua Harbor Hotel in Silver?
Well, the symposium, Greg, is really our opportunity to give the community an update on what we're working on, what we're trying to accomplish, and hearing it not from people like me, but from the people that are actually doing the work. So I thought I'd give you a little historical perspective on that as well, because I know how you love history. So when I retired from my employment in it was in 2012, was my first year of retirement. And I started getting involved in local activities. I was drawn to the lake, and I was drawn to the lake organizations. And in 2012, the EPA, the US EPA, and the New York State DEC jointly issued a TMDL for phosphorus for Chautauqua Lake, which clearly explained the dire state that the lake was in and the actions needed to improve the lake. So I was very interested and drawn to that, and got involved with that. And out of that, working, following my becoming a county legislator, trying to support those activities that were recommended. Most notably was recommended to complete the public sewers around Chautauqua Lake, but other activities that they recommended, some of which we've been successful in fulfilling, such as a testing program to document the septic systems around the lake. I was successful in getting the county health department to establish an inspection system for all sanitary septic systems within 250 feet of the lake, and requiring upgrades when they were appropriate. Looking at the 17 private commercial and institutional dischargers in the watershed, and recent accomplishment, or near accomplishment, is we're pursuing connecting the Maple Grove High School, I graduated from, to the South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District, because they have a aged, I'll use the word decrepit, septic system there that discharges directly into Dutch Hollow Creek, which goes directly into Chautauqua Lake. And so we have now an opportunity to take that waste out of Dutch Hollow Creek in the lake and send it to the treatment plant in Celeron. So that is hopefully going to be a project commencing later this year. We looked at all the farms in the watershed and worked with Soil and Water Conservation District to enroll them all in the New York State Agricultural Environmental Management Program. We've been successful at that. We developed conservation plans for planners dealing with phosphorus in the watershed. We worked with towns and villages to pursue stormwater sedimentation and erosion control programs. We've worked with public education about lawn care. We've worked with pollution prevention practices on roads and ditch maintenance. The county now pays the Soil and Water Conservation District to hydroseed all county and town and village ditches after their maintenance is done to them. The only disappointment is New York State is not at all interested. So New York State, when they maintain their ditches, they aren't interested in hydroseeding them. But that's just a sidelight. And management practices for handling and storing road salt. Been successful in getting grants for several municipalities to upgrade their salt storage systems to keep it from leaching into the streams and into the lake. So a lot has been accomplished coming from that TMDL. But the TMDL also led us to the desire to create a Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance, which I was part of the founding of and was the original chairman of the board, and now I find myself back as chairman of the board of that organization.
Which has been it's been reconstituted with different membership. And what was the basis of that, Pierre? Was just to get more encompassing?
The basis of the reconstituting the board was that when the organization was founded, the bylaws were created to have a board of directors that was elected by the members of the organization. So the members were, all the towns and villages were members, as well as organizations that had an interest, the Vacation Bureau, the Realtors Association, the Chautauqua Lake Association, the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy, the Chautauqua South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District, the Audubon Society. We're all members of the organization because they had an interest in the lake and the watershed. But it was an election process. And we found ourselves finally where the election process had been, I'm going to say, creatively utilized to have several organizations have multiple representatives on the Alliance board, and other organizations who really should have been represented were excluded from the board. So we strategized that really the towns and the villages around the lake should have a seat at the table, and the organizations that do work in the lake and the watershed, primarily the Chautauqua Lake Association, the Chautauqua Watershed Conservancy, and the Chautauqua Lake Partnership, should all have seats at the table. So that was and the county had to have a seat at the table because the county funds the organization considerably. So that was the basis of reconstituting the board to go from a 7-member board to a 18-member board.
We have enjoyed our annual meetings with Randall Perry. He's the executive director, I think is his term.
Yes.
Of that. And we got this whole thing here that I just read was by Jay Young, your head of public relations. And that has organized events, which is coming up this Saturday, and which looks like you're going to have A.J. Rees of GEI, coming, somebody from the Jefferson Project, North Carolina State University, and DEC. I think you have representatives of the major players there.
Right. So interesting that you mentioned some of the other players. We were successful from that first trip to Washington that I mentioned, that our lobbyist set us up with a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers and established a wonderful contact there who was successful in getting us a opportunity to have an aquatic ecosystem restoration project done on Chautauqua Lake and the watershed. So after several years visiting our federal representatives to get the funding support for that, We were successful, and we kicked that project off going on 2 years ago now. And so we are well into the second year. We're about to begin the third year of that 3-year project to identify the plans for remediating Chautauqua Lake and the watershed, working with the Army Corps of Engineers. And through that project, we pointed out to them clearly that the TMDL for Chautauqua Lake that was created in 2012 by the EPA and DEC indicated that the largest source of phosphorus loading to Chautauqua Lake was the internal loading that was coming out of the sediments. That was the only source of phosphorus loading to the lake that they had no recommendations how we address. And so we struggled trying to address the other sources of loading, but never were able to address the internal loading until the Army Corps project began, and DEC suddenly realized that they probably needed to step forward, and so they now have a project to investigate the source of the internal loading and what can be done about that. So we have the New York State DEC and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers working collaboratively on their plans for Chautauqua Lake, what they can do about the internal loading. So it's wonderful how these concepts come together. And the Jefferson Project, when I was newly on the legislature, a good friend from Chautauqua Institution, who was well connected with the Jefferson Project, suggested that we should go to visit the Jefferson Project in Lake George, which we did, and we fell in love with the Jefferson Project at Lake George, and they were extremely interested in Chautauqua Lake because we were notable because we had the greatest number of harmful algal blooms of any lake in the state at that time. And Lake George at that time had never had a harmful algal bloom, but they knew that it was a risk to them. So they were very interested in studying Chautauqua Lake to see what could be done about harmful algal blooms before it became a problem in their cherished Lake George. So that's where the work began with the Jefferson Project, which is through the cooperation of Chautauqua Institution and Chautauqua County. We've been able to keep that going, and now it's being pursued and funded by New York State. So Jefferson Project has done a lot of work in Chautauqua Lake, have learned a lot about Chautauqua Lake, and again, the symposium gives an opportunity for them to tell the community their story, where they are at. And the Army Corps of Engineers was unable to attend the symposium because of what's going on in Washington, but their plans are to release their preliminary plans for Chautauqua Lake later this year for the public review and comment.
Do you ever think you've earned a doctorate of collaboration?
Doctor of Collaboration. Similar story. We were just in Washington earlier this month, and our first trip to Washington, when we met with the Army Corps of Engineers, we met with an individual who was involved with the Pittsburgh District of the Corps, which we are working with, and was helpful in getting us going down the road with our project. And when we went back to Washington this month, we were told that Ryan had had a huge promotion. He is now the Deputy Chief of the Civil Division for the entire Army Corps of Engineers. So we were disappointed we wouldn't get to meet with Ryan. So we get in the meeting, in walks Ryan. I said, "So you are going to stop in to say hello?" And he said, "Pierre, I've been with you for 12 years. Do you think I'm going to leave you now? He sat down and was at the whole meeting.
Wonderful.
That's collaboration there.
Well, that's your consistency, your never say never attitude. And for that, we, the county, owe you a huge salute. There's so much that's on my agenda here, but I know time doesn't permit it all, other than to say I'm really rooting for you to enhance the Robert H. Jackson Field at the airport so that we can bring in all these celebrities. Having said that, you have 3 pages of stuff there. And as you were driving in with Judy, and you turned to Judy and said, I'm not sure what Greg's going to ask, but I wonder what he might ask. And is there a question you thought that I would ask you about that I haven't?
I think you've asked every question that I anticipated. And a few that you didn't that I filled in.
Is there a lot of people watching here, but you're the, one of the things that's delicate is that you are the chairman of the legislature. I mean, you have to deal with both parties, deal with lots of stakeholders, and I'm sure at times, obviously, you have your own personal opinions, but to be able to not manifest that personal opinion to the detriment of your position. I mean, as chairman, you've got a unique position. So how do you kind of, with your skill sets, kind of deal with that?
It's an interesting position because, Greg, of the breadth of the operations of the county. Something that most of the community doesn't appreciate is how broad the operations of the county are. We have a health department, we have a mental hygiene department, we have a social services department, we have a sheriff who runs a jail as well as road patrols. We have sewer districts, we have water districts, we have a landfill. We have all these operations of the county, and they're so broad. So to think that a position of chairman of the legislature would have an opportunity to really manage that breadth of operations, plus we have a county executive, the executive branch has responsibility for managing those operations. I view my job as being there to help and support. And so when I'm dealing with the legislators, as chairman of the legislature, my role is to help them and support them in their roles. When I'm dealing with the various department heads across the county, I'm there to help them and support them and advise them. So that's really the role that I have now, is to be more helpful, supportive, and opportunities to advise.
Well, we, the citizens of Chautauqua County, are the beneficiary of having a Pierre Chagnon in the position that you are, and with the great insight that you have. And you've shared it. I mean, you've shared it since forever, but certainly since 2012 when you retired from your job, and you've committed so much time and resources, well beyond 40 hours a week. So I, for one, thank you very much, and thanks for sharing all that today.
Sure, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it.